You've probably thought about what inspires you, your dreams, your passions, your hobbies, the things that make you come to life. But have you ever stopped to think about how your city actually plays a role in shaping those dreams? Think about Paris, where Picasso and Hemingway, Renoir, Monet found their voices, or how Renaissance artists like Leonardo da Vinci, Botticelli, Michelangelo basically all come from Florence. We see throughout history and even today that your city isn't just a place that you live. It is actively shaping who you are becoming, and it is worth it to just stop a little bit and ask ourselves if the cities that we live in, the people who are at the top, do we actually want to become like them? Do we want to become like what the city actually values, the ambitions of the city? Hello, my beautiful ladies. I hope that you guys are well. Welcome back to another episode of Mademoiselle Diaries. Today, we're talking about why your city actually matters more than what you think and its hidden influence in your personal ambition. The reason why I'm making this video is, first of all, I've been trying to get into reading more articles on Substack or just try to find any article that looks interesting on Google, and I came across this one article that I have read many times, and people who know me in my circle who are watching this are probably tired of me speaking about this, but it's called Cities and Ambition by Paul Graham, and everyone needs to read this because it truly opened my mind and it almost gave me a confirmation of the places that I don't want to live in, the places that I could potentially try to live in. I would actually like to start the video by reading this passage, which I think is so brilliant. How much does it matter what message a city sends? Empirically, the answer seems to be a lot. You might think that if you had enough strength of mind to do great things, you'd be able to transcend your environment. Where you live makes at most a couple % difference, but if you look at the historical evidence, it seems to matter more than that. Most people who did great things were clumped together in few places where that sort of thing was done at the time. I'm going to be sharing with you ladies examples of this happening throughout history and how we see little clusters of certain thinkers, artists being surrounded in one area of the world or a particular neighborhood in a particular city in the world. For me personally, I have grown up most of my life in Jakarta. At the age of 18 till now, I have lived in so many different cities: Singapore, Perth, Paris, Jakarta, and I have found that my personal ambitions, my personal dreams, and the way that I feel in every city is so different. And I have found little bits of myself. I have found myself arriving in certain cities where I'm like, this is exactly where I want to be and where I need to be, and other cities where I felt really disconnected with myself. And we're going to talk more about that. Like, why is that the case? When you already have personal ambitions, you think that your mind can take you really far, and it can take you really far, but you have to use this as an advantage. You have to use your location, if you can, as an advantage, not something that will inhibit you from actually pursuing your dreams and what you are called for. And ladies, I know that what I'm saying is so obvious, but it's so obvious that we don't really think about it when we're thinking about pursuing our dreams and our goals. We think that if we stay in a certain place, if we just work harder, if we just excel better in our mind, we're more disciplined, then surely we will get to where we want to get at. The place that you live in, you need to actually spend a lot of time investigating if the place that you live in, the city that you live in, the conversations that you overhear, are they actually helping you or just walking and fighting in an uphill battle? The first city that I wanted to talk about is Paris. Literally my favorite city in the entire world. Paris is the way it is today for certain reasons. You know, there are specific reasons why people act a certain way. They really cherish culture so much and thinking outside of the box. It all dates back to even in French Revolution, but the example that I wanted to point out was Paris in the 19th to 20th century. This city attracted so many great thinkers, artists, poets: Picasso, Hemingway, Scott Fitzgerald, Rimbaud, Sartre, Simone de Beauvoir. All of these great names and writers that we always hear about have all spent a little bit of their time in Paris, especially in their formative years. And that's the most critical point. Where do you spend your most formative years at. The cafe culture at this time was huge and is still quite big today in Paris. There are these two specific cafes, Les Deux Magots and Café de Flore, that attracted so many great thinkers, intellectuals. People would literally arrive there at 9 a.m., work all day, leave at midnight, and treat it almost like a workplace. And all of these writers and thinkers like Sartre, Camus, Rimbaud gathered in one place, exchanging ideas. It creates this movement, this inspiration. You know, you overhear a conversation, you jump in, oh, what are you guys talking about? Da 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 da. Let me write that on my book. Like, it creates endless inspiration for the writer. Sartre literally said, we settled here from 9 in the morning until noon. We worked there, we went for lunch, and came back at 2 and talked with friends. At 4, we worked again, and then we met up for people at dinner. It was literally their headquarters. In these cafes, they also held events, so poets would read their poems. They would have artists who would just draw what was happening. There would be live music like jazz or classical music. It was all very cultural, and it was literally a movement that happened around cafe. My favorite neighborhood in Paris is Montmartre. Literally nothing more beautiful than the view that you can see of Paris. Just so beautiful, especially at night. There's a reason why Montmartre has a certain charm and why it's so artistic, why it's so touristic today. Montmartre was actually a poor neighborhood. A lot of artists were still trying to make a living out of art because it was hard to make a living out of art. They settled in Montmartre because they had cheap rent, so they just stayed in studios. And this specific neighborhood just attracted more and more artists that it became almost accepted to just live for art and to be poor as a result. You could be penniless at the time in this neighborhood, yet still be respected. What they valued was really art, you know, thinking differently, challenging the status quo. Artists like Picasso, Van Gogh, Renoir, they all spent some time in Montmartre. It blows my mind to think how the neighborhood that you live in impacts everything. It impacts so much, not just the city, but literally your zip code. All these jazz clubs and cabaret happening in Montmartre, it's all historical. Writers would perform their poems, painters would sketch the crowd, musicians would play the experimental pieces, and ideas just kept bouncing off the walls. Like, just imagine being in a room like that and how much creativity will spark out of you, how much inspiration you will gain, especially if you're creative or if you're an artist, how much that will actually help you in becoming a Picasso, in becoming a Van Gogh. I really wonder, you know, if Van Gogh were to grow up, for example, in the city that I'm in right now, Jakarta, would he have the same creativity, the same inspiration? Would he produce the same work? Definitely not. Another example that Paul Graham talks about is Florence. He says practically every 15th century Italian painter you've heard of was from Florence, even though Milan was just as big. People in Florence were genetically different, so you have to assume there was someone born in Milan with as much natural ability as Leonardo. What happened to him? If even someone with the same natural ability as Leonardo couldn't beat the force of environment, do you suppose you can? And he says, I don't. I'm fairly stubborn, but I wouldn't try to fight this force. I'd rather use it. So I've thought a lot about where to live. This is where it makes you really think, okay, based on my pursuits, whether it's creative pursuits, whether I want to be in the financial markets, I want to build a business, I want to just be surrounded by writers, by people who think, where is an ideal place for me to live? And this is something so crucial to talk about. The conversations that you overhear every single day, ladies, the conversations that I've heard in the terraces in Paris, and I don't want to sound so cliche, but I've heard people think about very deep existential things in cafes, and it makes me think. I start to think about what that person thought about at home, and then I journal about it, and then I talk about it with other friends. It creates a whole movement. I'm not going to judge or critique anything, but for example, if you're in a city that constantly people are trying to chase more followers, have more fame, it will rub off on you 100%, because people will always talk about it, and suddenly we'll feel like this black sheep. Some people would actually want to follow the crowd, and it will happen to most people. And the thing is, you can fight against your environment, but why would you? Why would you live your life fighting an uphill battle when your environment can actually help you excel into becoming who you are called to be. And I know that it is not a privilege for everyone to be living in a city where they want to be, but I wanted to make this video to actually just put it in your head, to plant a seed in your head that maybe it's something that is worth considering. Maybe it's something that I can work towards, that I can save up for if this is a city that I just feel like people just don't value the things that I value, or people here want certain fame, or they value money over everything else, and I personally want to be more creative and I want to just not feel judged for it. Then there's something to think about there. I do not live in Paris anymore. I currently live in Jakarta. I moved back for the past 8 months already. I've been living here, and this is home, and this is where I grew up. So it's basically home. My family is here, and I think the time that I have had here was so crucial for me. But this article was a confirmation, and I don't want to jinx this. I actually don't really like talking about my future plans and where I'm going to live, because I have no idea where God will take me sometimes. I just have no idea. But reading this article actually gave me confirmation that this is not a city that I want to live in. I do not value the things that the top successful people value here. I do not value the same thing. And sometimes it does feel hard to connect in certain levels where in Paris, I would literally just be in a terrace alone, and suddenly a stranger talks to me and we're talking about Dostoevsky, and I'm like, whoa, like that would never happen here, or that has never happened here. I had to share this article just because it moved me so much, and it made me think about how fast I want to make choices in my life. Especially when you're in your 20s or 30s, those are basically your formative years where you're learning a lot. And you should be really thinking about how the city that you live in will have an enormous impact in your future. And the best way to do this, Paul Graham says, it's literally just to move, to test out different cities if you can. I know that this is not a possibility for everyone, but at least to make it a goal to travel. You don't know 100% until you're actually in the city. I thought that Singapore would be a nice place for me to live in long term years ago. And then I lived there and I love the city. I still love the city so much. Like, it gives me so much nostalgia. But I also knew that when I landed there, like I feel a little bit off. You know, the ambitions of the city are quite different to my personal ambitions. It's only when you arrive in a city and you see that clash that you realize, okay, so this is what my personal ambitions are. This is what the ambitions of the city are. Maybe they kind of conflict with one another. Maybe this is not a place that I want to stay here forever. And you kind of learn as you move to different cities, and I've definitely felt that way. I think for me, culture or nature are very, very important. So either Paris, where there's a lot of culture but not so much a lot of nature, and on the other side, Perth, which is the complete opposite of Paris. You know, it's very small city, but there's a lot of nature, and that's something that I truly appreciated. Even though, yes, I didn't have all the culture that I wanted, at least the sea, the ocean, all of that sustained me. So this is literally a reminder for you guys to travel, to put it in your plans, to make it a goal, you know, to see what's out there and where do you feel like your heart beats the most, where you feel alive. And if you can't travel immediately, I would so recommend to just watch movies, read books. This is why I became so obsessed with movies and books growing up in Jakarta, because I didn't have access to all the culture. So I did everything alone, got all these books, and became obsessed with learning myself and imagining myself in the cities that were described in the stories. A movie that pops in my mind is Midnight in Paris, because I recently just watched it with my partner, and basically the protagonist, he is seeking to be more fulfilled creatively. He's trying to write this book, and he goes to Paris to be just more inspired. And he's like, we have to move to Paris. Like, I feel so inspired here. And he meets all of these writers that I mentioned, like Fitzgerald, Hemingway, in a cafe. And it's such a good movie, ladies. Woody Allen is really good in terms of capturing that nostalgia. And if you watch that movie, if it sparks something in you, perhaps there's something to look at. Or there's another movie called Social Network, the story about Facebook happening all in Silicon Valley. It really portrays, the ambition of Silicon Valley, of the world of startups, technology, all of that. Hollywood or Los Angeles, obviously we know, I don't even need to tell you ladies, but watch the movie La La Land, it talks all about Mia, who really wants to make it in the entertainment industry. And it's really true. That's really the thing about Hollywood, that's why so many great actors come from there. There's a reason why. The place literally encourages that. I love books because it is just the writer, you, and your imagination. I personally love fiction. I've been getting more into fiction this year. We have a book club in Mademoiselle Society, so feel free to join. We read all classics. We just finished Pride and Prejudice, and I was transported to the world of Jane Austen in England in the 1800s, something totally different than what I'm used to. But you see how books, movies, culture, all of these things have such an enormous impact in our inspiration. I love culture. I love all of this. And this is why I talk so much about it, is because it really makes you dream. It really, you start to put yourself in visions that you would have never thought about had you not read the book before. So yes, a lot of people say that the 5 people that you hang out with matters. And yes, it really matters. So how much more do you think that the city that you live in matters? It matters so much. Travel, 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 move around, especially if you're young and you don't have kids yet. I'm encouraging you ladies to take a step out of faith, because that is truly when you will get to know what you really like, who you are, what your personal ambitions are. So let's all thank Paul Graham for his articles. Ladies, if you want to stop scrolling, doom scrolling on social media, 10 out of 10 recommend downloading Substack or just reading more articles. I've been challenging myself to read articles, 1 article a day, and it's done wonders in my life. I'll try to link more articles that I have been loving. There's another one by Paul Graham called What to Do, What You Like, or something along the lines, but that is another great read that is kind of similar to Cities and Ambition. But I hope that this video made you think a little bit more about your life, your city, what you want for your life, your travel plan. I love you guys so much, and see you next time. Mwah.